with Sophie Raworth.
At 6, Prince Harry gets an unequivocal apology and substantial damages after a long legal battle with Rupert Murdoch's newspaper empire.
The truth that has now been exposed is that News Group newspapers unlawfully engaged more than 100 private investigators over at least 16 years.
News Group Newspapers says sorry for serious intrusion into Prince Harry's private life and Princess Diana's over a period of 25 years. Also tonight, the 12-year-old boy stabbed to death yesterday on his way home from school in Birmingham is named as Leo Ross. A 14-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder. The government reveals an encounter between this Russian spy ship and the Royal Navy off the coast of Cornwall. We'll tell you what the unusual move was all about. Donald Trump threatens Russia with high tariffs and sanctions if President Vladimir Putin does not end the war in Ukraine soon. And an amber alert as the Met Office warns of winds of up to 90 miles an hour and a risk to life when Storm Iowyn hits the UK this Friday.
On BBC London, more from Bushey after a man admits to murdering 3 women in their home. Plus, anger over the illegal subletting of vital key worker homes on holiday rental websites.
Welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Duke of Sussex has claimed a monumental victory after being given an unequivocal apology and substantial damages from News Group newspapers for serious intrusion into his private life by The Sun. It comes at the end of his 5-year legal battle with the owner of The Sun newspaper and the now defunct News of the World. Prince Harry and the former Labour deputy leader, Lord Watson, alleged that journalists from News Group newspapers used illegal means to intrude into their private lives. Lord Watson has said they're preparing a dossier for the Metropolitan Police. Our home and legal correspondent Dominic Casciani was at the High Court.
Headline after headline, story after story. Years of intrusion now accepted by The Sun in a stunning conclusion in Prince Harry's battle against the tabloid. For years, the Duke has said he was a victim of unlawful practices. He blames the media for the death of his mother. He says journalists destroyed his first flush of love with Chelsea Davy. And today at the High Court, this was the moment of reckoning. From yesterday, there had been clues of secret talks. He'd been up all night, but the Duke's barrister David Sherborne was looking surprisingly fresh-faced and chipper.
Mr Sherborne, has there been a settlement?
Good morning. And see we did. Just after 10:30, Mr Sherborne stood up in court and announced the two sides had reached an agreement and read out words his client had long waited to hear. NGN offers a full and unequivocal apology to the Duke of Sussex for the serious intrusion by The Sun between 1996 and 2011 into his private life, including incidents of unlawful activities carried out by private investigators working for The Sun. Outside court, the Prince's legal team said the truth has finally been exposed.
In a monumental victory today, News UK have admitted that The Sun, the flagship title for Rupert Murdoch's UK media empire, has indeed engaged in illegal practices.
The former Labour deputy leader Lord Tom Watson, the other remaining claimant in this battle, also received an apology. NGN admitted the long-closed News of the World had placed him under surveillance.
News Group newspapers owes so many such apologies. Thousands of ordinary people just trying to live their lives have endured the same unlawful behaviour. Many were victims of heinous crimes, including victims of terrorism, grieving families and people caught in personal tragedies. I'll never get over some of the stories I've heard in this case.
This is a major victory for Prince Harry and his legal team. It's the first time in 18 years of battles that the News Group newspapers have admitted any wrongdoing on behalf of The Sun. But it also has benefits for the Murdoch empire. By settling now, they avoid a trial which could have seen allegations of a corporate-wide cover-up. Would have looked at Rupert Murdoch's confidant, Rebecca Brooks, NGN's chief executive and former Sun editor. She was found not guilty of involvement in phone hacking in a previous criminal trial, and denies knowing about unlawful news gathering. Prince Harry's lawyer said questions about her time in charge remain unanswered.
At her trial in 2014, Rebecca Brooks said, "When I was editor of The Sun, we ran a clean ship." Now, 10 years later, when she is CEO of the company, they now admit when she was editor of The Sun, they ran a criminal enterprise.
NGN says there was no voicemail interception at The Sun and it's not admitted any wrongdoing by its journalists. So is this affair all over?
I think we're looking to the government and we're also looking to the police and say, you know, are you going to investigate what went on here? Unlawful behaviour that's been admitted. Surely now's the time for another police investigation and a full police investigation into the wrongdoing here.
Prince Harry's not got everything he wanted, but he and Lord Watson have got more than £10 million in the payout and legal costs. Today's cheque, the price NGN were willing to pay to reach an agreement with a bitter enemy. Dominic Kashani, BBC News.
Our media editor, Katie Razzle, is with me. Give us a sense of the scale of this victory.
Well, I do think it is a significant victory for Prince Harry and also for Lord Watson. As Dominic was saying, never before have News Group newspapers admitted unlawful activity at its flagship newspaper, The Sun, only at the News of the World, which Rupert Murdoch shut down more than a decade ago. Now they have admitted that private investigators hired by the paper did act unlawfully. So that is a big win. But also, as Dom was saying, you know, this is also a win for News Group. That's what happens when you settle. You know, there's positives for both sides. And for News Group, they have avoided a potentially what could have been a really damaging case, that drip, drip, drip of allegations, suggestions of a cover-up by senior executives, suggestions that phone hacking and other unlawful news-gathering techniques were widespread at the newspaper over many years from 1996. Now, it's important to say they would have fought that in court. They strongly deny that. But now we will not hear that evidence. Now, there was a big headache for another person mentioned in Dominic's piece, Rebecca Brooks, because people might remember she was the editor of the News of the World and later The Sun, and now she is the CEO of News UK. Now, she's always been backed by Rupert Murdoch, but of course, positions can shift, and we'll see what develops. But it has taken a prince with deep pockets to get it this far. Clearly, if the police are minded to investigate, or indeed if the government decides it wants to restart Leveson or open a public inquiry, that will be a serious development. I certainly can't see the second happening, and we'll have to wait and see what the police have to say.
Katie Razzle, thank you. A 12-year-old boy who was stabbed to death on his way home from school yesterday in Birmingham has been named as Leo Ross. His family described him as the most beautiful, kind child who had not one aggressive bone in his body. A 14-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Phil Mackey reports.
His school said Leo Ross was a lovely and bright boy who was adored by his friends. On his way home yesterday, he was fatally stabbed in the stomach. Today, his friends paid their respects, many of them in tears, each supporting the other. Hannah, who was in the same class, came with her mum, Sima.
He was like a nice, kind kid, and he'd just do his work and get on with it, and helpful as well, and very welcoming.
Something has to be done about this. It's like, I can't imagine what the parents are going through. Both sets of parents, you know, Leo's mum and dad and his family, I just, you know, it's just devastating.
Rowena was another mum who had a son in Leo's class.
He didn't deserve this, from what my children say. He was a lovely, caring, innocent little boy.
It's another young life lost to the scourge of knife crime. Desperate efforts were made to save him, but they were in vain. The West Midlands had the highest rate of knife crime in the UK last year, and many initiatives have been set up to try to tackle the problem. But the message just doesn't seem to be getting through.
My message to the wider community and young people is you must not carry knives. We've really got to enforce that message collectively as the police and the community, everyone. We must not carry knives, we must not use knives, because these are the tragic consequences of it.
In a tribute to Leo, a family member told the BBC he was the most beautiful, kind child, and this would not have been provoked by him. He was funny, sweet, and had not one aggressive bone in his body. The nicest kid you would meet. As knife crime has risen, even younger people are becoming victims. Leo Ross, aged just 12, is the latest to lose his life. You know, the police officers who are trying to tackle knife crime in our cities often talk about the danger hours after school. This is when youngsters are most vulnerable, they feel, particularly teenagers, in this case even younger. The council leader here in Birmingham said this was a senseless attack. The police said that many parents will find it difficult to comprehend what happened. And you can see people still coming here tonight to leave flowers, to leave messages. There's a real sense of anger and disbelief and despair, really, that these kinds of things keep happening, Sophie.
Thank you. Now, have a look at this. This is a slice of one of thousands of underwater cables on the seabed across the world. This one is a submarine power cable, a heavy one at that, and it is used to carry electric power between countries or wind farms to the shore. These there, those small discs are the conductors, and it also carries fibre optics as well. Now, these are absolutely vital to our country's infrastructure. And the reason that I'm showing you this is because we've just discovered that these cables led to an encounter between a Royal Navy submarine and a Russian spy ship off the coast of Britain. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale is here to explain more.
Thanks, Sophie. Britain's long suspected that Russia has been mapping critical undersea cables with concerns they could be cut or sabotaged. Those fears have only increased with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And this is one of the vessels Britain believes has been doing that clandestine work, tracked here in 2018 by a Royal Navy warship. Russia describes Yantar as a research vessel. The Ministry of Defence here calls it a spy ship. Yantar has once again been tracked near UK waters. On November the 10th, it was off the coast of Cornwall. 4 days later, it was in the Irish Sea, said to be hovering close to cables between the UK and Ireland. At the time, she was being monitored by a number of Royal Navy vessels. But secretly, the Russian ship was also being tracked by a British submarine. And in a highly unusual move, that submarine surfaced. Defence sources say the submarine verbally warned the Russian ship that it knew what it was doing. And today, the Defence Secretary said this was part of new, more robust rules of engagement.
And I also want President Putin to hear this message. We see you, we know what you're doing, and we will not shy away from robust action to protect this country.
Now, there are thousands of miles of undersea cables connecting both Europe and North America. They carry more than 90% of the world's internet traffic, part of Europe's critical national infrastructure, which could be targeted. And in the Baltic Sea, Russia's suspected of using merchant ships, a so-called shadow fleet, to sabotage those cables, something Moscow denies. But over the past 2 months, there have been several incidents where undersea cables here have been damaged. The most recent involving this oil tanker, the Eagle S. Last month, Finland boarded and then impounded the vessel. It's accused of dragging its anchor for more than 50 miles. The question, was it deliberate? But in response, Britain and its NATO allies have said they're now stepping up their monitoring and patrols around Europe's critical undersea cables. Sophie.
Jonathan, thank you. A 26-year-old man who shot and killed his ex-girlfriend and her sister with a crossbow and stabbed their mother to death has pleaded guilty to their murders. Kyle Clifford attacked Louise and Hannah and their mother Carol, who were the wife and daughters of the BBC racing commentator John Hunt, at the family home in Hertfordshire last summer. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning reports.
Two sisters and their mother, Hannah, Louise and Carol Hunt, part of a well-loved family. The racing commentator John Hunt and his other daughter losing so much. A family ripped apart by a man set to terrorise and murder them. An ex-boyfriend whose response was to kill. Carl Clifford finally today admitting he'd murdered the three women, imprisoned Louise and had a crossbow and knife. The only thing he denied, raping Louise Hunt. He'll now face a trial for this. What happened at the Hunt family home in Hertfordshire when Clifford arrived was unimaginable violence against the three women. He tied up his former partner Louise's ankles and arms with duct tape and shot her and her sister Hannah through the chest with the crossbow. He stabbed their mother Carol to death. Hannah did manage to call 999 twice and told the police she feared she was going to die. When they arrived, they found her near the front door, still alive, but they were unable to save her. This was former soldier Clifford leaving the family's house last July after murdering them, carrying a white sheet with the crossbow underneath. Neighbours had heard screaming in the early evening. After leaving them to die, Clifford went on the run, finally found after a manhunt the following afternoon hiding in a cemetery. Armed police surrounded the scene and paramedics ran in. Clifford had shot himself with the crossbow, suffering serious injuries. He's now in a wheelchair. After his family were murdered, John Hunt in a statement talked of the horrid evil that brought devastation on an unimaginable scale, but said, "We will get through this."
It's just such an awful, awful situation. But the best thing to come out of this is, by him pleading guilty, I just hope it means that John and Amy don't have the agony prolonged, in the sense that they now haven't got to relive all that horror in court.
The government still has to decide whether to tighten the law on crossbows, possibly requiring those owning them to get a licence. But it's not just the weapon, but those who use it. Yet again, women murdered in their own homes. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
The time is just after 6:15. Our main story this evening. Prince Harry gets an unequivocal apology and substantial damages after a 5-year legal battle with Rupert Murdoch's newspaper empire. And coming up, after 4 lynxes were found in the Highlands earlier this month, we find out why rewilding activists are taking action to bring some species back.
And on BBC London, an urgent appeal for more blood donors to come forward to help treat sickle cell disease, and the sweet smell of success for one Jamaican Patty Baker in Brixton.
President Trump has told Russia's Vladimir Putin to make a deal to end the war in Ukraine or face tough taxes, tariffs and sanctions. In a message on the Truth social network, he warned we can do it the easy way or the hard way. Our North America editor Sarah Smith is in Washington. And Sarah, the president vowed to bring a swift end to this war. Will it work?
Yeah, well, he used that post to warn Vladimir Putin that there would be a high price to pay if he doesn't soon start talking about a deal to end the war in Ukraine. And of course, there are already sanctions on the Russian economy, but he seems to be thinking of something a bit more drastic, warning of those high taxes, tariffs and sanctions. And as you said, he wrote in this post, we can do it the easy way or the hard way, and the easy way is always better. It's time to make a deal. No more lives should be lost. So that's pretty clear. I mean, you'll remember Donald Trump did promise during the election campaign that he would end the war in Ukraine on his first day in office, which obviously didn't happen, but he's clearly getting impatient. At a news conference in the Oval Office on his very first day, on Monday, he did say that he had spoken to President Zelensky and knows that he's ready to start talking about a deal, but he's just not sure if Vladimir Putin is ready to do so yet. And it's worth remembering as well, there was a huge amount of concern before Donald Trump came into office that he might try and cut off the supply of aid and weapons to help Ukraine's defence. Well, he's made no moves to do that yet, but he has said that he thinks that European nations should be doing a lot more to support Ukraine, so that might be something of a warning.
Sarah Smith, our North America editor, thank you. The Chancellor says she is optimistic about the economy despite government borrowing rising by more than expected last month. The figure of almost £18 billion is the highest for December in 4 years. Rachel Reeves is in Switzerland, where she's trying to attract investors to the UK. Our economics editor Faisal Islam has been speaking to her.
Britain needs a bit of an economic sales job right now.
So nice to see you.
And that's why the Chancellor is giving new detail on her growth plans to the movers and shakers of world finance here.
This government have our #1 priority as growing the economy to make working people back in Britain better off.
But after tricky markets this month, the question is what the government is actually doing rather than saying about growth. Her answer aimed squarely at the big investors here in the city, in big tech and in our airports.
When there are decisions around infrastructure investment, the answer can't always be no. Yeah. And with this government, the answer is yes.
Yes, and it seems like you're re-evaluating Heathrow and Gatwick, key investors here at Davos that own those airports.
I'm not going to comment on speculation, but this government is determined to bring in trade and investment into Britain.
And some helpful backing from the man who controls the biggest state fund on the planet, the £1 trillion Norwegian oil fund.
I just love UK. We are invested in great companies in the UK. We have great managements running those companies.
So you see the growth story. There's a new government in place.
We hear what they say, and we continue to be invested there for the long term.
The Chancellor's new sales pitch is laser-guided at important investors like that Norwegian executive and his counterparts in Gulf nations. And it is significant. It will mean that growth trumps environmental concerns about runways, that it trumps migration concerns in terms of visas for scientists and entrepreneurs, and in terms of big tech investment, it also trumps concerns about competition. We've effectively fired our chief competition regulator. Now, what message does that send?
The chair of the Competition and Markets Authority resigned. He recognises that this government wants a strategic reset. Often UK regulators can hold up decisions where other regulators around the world have already decided. That's no good for stability, and that's no good for encouraging investment into Britain.
One top British exporter around the world, heralded here for his charity work, was talking up the country.
Great Britain will always be great, to me. That's what I'm all about. You know, I'm not a politician, I'm not a scientist, I stay out of all of those kind of things.
And as Britain makes its play for some part of the hundreds of billions big tech is investing in AI dominance, the Chancellor is striking a more optimistic economic tone. Faisal Islam, BBC News in Davos.
8 men are on trial in Manchester accused of the sexual abuse of 2 children more than 20 years ago. They face 56 charges, including rape and indecency with a child. This trial follows a police investigation into the grooming gangs in the Rochdale area. Our North of England correspondent Fiona Trott is outside Manchester Crown Court for us now. Fiona.
Well, the court was told the 2 victims were passed around and, in the words of the prosecution today, used as sex slaves from the age of 13, abused, degraded and then discarded, they said. And what's confronting in the evidence we heard is that one of them was made to have sex with 2 men in a grim, cold, dark basement of a shop. This was a child. And a girl was abused in the back of a car while still wearing her school uniform. We were also told another incident was recorded, and to this day the victim is terrified that footage still exists. And let me tell you what else was striking today. The prosecution told the jury the girls were well known to social services and other agencies, and it was no secret they were having sex with older Asian men. No reports were made to the police, no action was taken, not until 2015 we were told, when the first victim came forward. All the men deny the charges against them. They are 64-year-old Mohammed Zahid from Crumpsall, 50-year-old Kasia Bashir and 66-year-old Mushtaq Ahmed, who are both from Oldham, and from Rochdale, 39-year-old Rahiz Khan, 43-year-old Mohammed Shahzad, 41-year-old Nisar Hussain, 48-year-old Naheem Akram and 40-year-old Arfan Khan. And the trial here continues.
Fiona, thank you. 4 lynxes illegally released in the Scottish Highlands were recaptured earlier this month. It's not known who released them, but it comes amid a growing number of so-called rewilding activists who believe rare and even extinct species should be reintroduced to the UK regardless of what the government rules say. Justin Marilla has been to meet one of them.
What Derek Gow does is potentially criminal. That's because some of the animals he breeds are extinct and there are laws against their release. Animals like lynx.
That is a dramatic cat.
Police Scotland is investigating the lynx release there.
You've got lynx. Did you release lynx into Scotland?
I did not release lynx in Scotland.
Would you consider doing that?
Would I consider doing it? I think it'd be really difficult, and our cats would not be good candidate cats because they're so tame. I understand why the people who did it. The creatures that should be here aren't here because of what we did in the past, and now that we just don't need as many sheep or all the food in theory that where the landscape's here to produce, why can't we start to restore some of the lost creatures to it?
This is not just a hobby. Derek Gow's 400-acre farm here in Devon has become a centre for breeding rare species. He employs 15 people, and while he may not have any plans to release his lynx into the wild anytime soon, this place has become a hub for other covert species reintroductions.
The girl?
Like water voles, he's released 25,000 of this once common species. He's released dozens of these too, beavers. And now he's breeding storks and cranes, polecats and insects too, including these glowworms.
This is irresponsible. You don't know the damage that could be done. You don't know the financial impacts that could be caused. Where are the impact assessments? And in the event that we end up in a position where they need to be controlled, there is no ability to control those species.
Derek Gow plans to release these Scottish wildcats next year. Some see him as a courageous visionary, others as an arrogant maverick whose animal releases could do more harm than good. Justin Rowlatt, BBC News, Devon.
Football now. Manchester City face Paris Saint-Germain tonight in a crunch match in the Champions League. There's a danger both clubs may not qualify for the next stages of the competition. Natalie Perks is pitchside for us in Paris. Natalie.
Well, when UEFA shook up the Champions League format, it was big nights like this that they were after. What they couldn't have expected was that two powerhouses would be perilously close to being dumped out of the competition at the first half. Realistically, City in 24th place and PSG in 26th both need a win tonight to get into the playoffs. City have at least re-signed Erling Haaland on that record 9.5-year contract. The happy Norwegian told us yesterday he's confident the club knows what it's doing when it comes to the 115 charges City are facing for alleged breaches of the Premier League's financial rules, charges that the club denies. Pep Guardiola says after the match he and Luis Enrique, the PSG boss, his former teammate from Barcelona, will resume their eternal friendship. But tonight he's very much hoping for a, quote, horrible performance from the French champions.
Natalie, thank you. Sorry about the poor quality of the sound there. I think the water had got into her microphone. Ben Rich, you're going to tell us much more about the weather.
Well, very wet there in Paris, Sophie, but there's some wet and indeed some very windy weather on the way for us here at home. And so the Met Office has now issued an amber warning for Friday with the approach of Storm Eowyn. Now, we were talking about this storm last night. The warning that's been issued has now been upgraded to an amber. The risk of wind gusts for some of us of 90 miles per hour, which could cause some major disruption. More on that in a moment. Right now, it's fairly quiet. Clear spells through the night, 1 or 2 showers, some mist patches. We will see some rain approaching Northern Ireland by the end of the night. Quite a cold night once again, a frost for many. And then for tomorrow, we see this band of rain pushing its way from west to east, turning to snow over high ground in Scotland. It's going to be quite a breezy day, in fact, very windy around some of these western coasts of Wales, the southwest of England, along the English Channel coast as well. Gusts of 50, 60 miles per hour. Temperatures between 5 and 9 degrees. But I want to take you out into the Atlantic because this is where the storm for Friday is currently taking shape. This zone of cloud here, but within this, just starting to see the first signs of this area of low pressure. And over the next day or so, this is going to deepen rapidly as it hurtles towards our shores. Look at all the isobars on this chart. This is a storm that really means business. This is the area covered by the amber warning from the Met Office. Widespread gusts of 60 to 70 miles per hour. Some coasts and hills 80 to 90 miles per hour or more. It's worth noting that the Isle of Man is not covered by UK weather warnings, but here the weather could be really very poor indeed, with some exceptionally strong winds, gales widely across the UK, outbreaks of rain, some snow across Scotland, even to low levels for a time. So we could see some really disruptive weather through the day on Friday, particularly, I think, around some of these Irish sea coasts. If you have any sort of plans for Friday, you will want to stay in touch with the forecast. Sophie.
Ben, thank you. That's it from us on the BBC News at 6. Right now, it is time for the news where you are. Goodbye.
Welcome.